My name is Susan Sonz. I moved into this neighborhood, Tribeca, in 1976. I had moved to New York from Massachusetts, and I was a ceramic artist. I still consider myself a ceramic artist, though I don't do it at the moment. I needed a large space, I needed a studio, and Tribeca was like a wild frontier. No one lived here. I'd say there were about 50 of us, it felt like, who were living down here at the time. I'd sit over there across from the school at a bar called Mickey's and watch the boats go by. There was nothing down here. We had dogs who just ran free in the fields. It was lovely. I was actually quite successful in my work as a ceramic artist, as a sculptor. I had solo shows in New York and Washington, D.C. This was all going on at once. It was very exciting. And I was written up in the New York Times a couple of times. And I was happy and married and about to have a baby, and then had a new baby, and everything was great. And unfortunately, Max's father was killed in an accident when he was about 6 months old. A year later, I had to really find a way to make a living, as opposed to just being an artist and, supplementing a living. The first job stop that I made was the college right here behind us, the MCC, and I did that sort of New York thing, and I dreamt up a job for myself and went over and proposed it and developed the children's theater series. And they bought it. And it was very rough going. The neighborhood was very young, very new. But the series, I believe, still goes on. I left after a couple of years. And while I was working at the college, and my 2-year-old was literally living in this park, in Washington Market Park, which, by the way, opened the week he was born, which was also interesting, in 1982. Someone came up to me and said, "You spend more time here than any other human being. I'm leaving a job. Would you like to take care of this park?" When I think about it, in the early 80s, I remember when Robert De Niro was moving in, and we thought, there goes the neighborhood. We're screwed now. This is it. He had a giant crane, I remember, a big sort of Molly crane, so he could put plants on the roof of his building next door to me, where Citibank is now. And we thought, oh, forget about it. If anyone's got that kind of money, it's just going to ruin this place. But in fact, the neighborhood has grown up beautifully. You can get wistful about the old days, but I have to say I've been very happy to live here. I'm still very happy to live here. My kids have enjoyed this place tremendously. Both of them have grown up in this park. So in fact, I'm still the park manager, which is kind of weird and amazing. There were 3 or 4 years that I didn't do it, but I was asked back a year ago and was happy to come back and put the place back in shape. I think the park is pulling back together. It had a couple of like the neighborhood, a couple of bad years because of 9/11. This place was overrun with people and debris, and had trouble the whole neighborhood had trouble recuperating quickly as it should have. I don't think we should have pulled together any quicker than we did. We went through a natural grieving process and should have. I think the city wanted us to snap out of it very quickly. And probably the federal government. I'm not sure, I'm not one of them, so I wouldn't know. I got the feeling when they were making the Stuyvesant students go back so quickly and pushing our kids to go back into 234 and 89, that they wanted us to, as they kept saying, get back to normal. We all knew that normal was a long way away, if ever, because you're changed forever by an experience like that. And I know the whole world had a strong reaction. But of course, Tribeca had a very personal, individually personal reaction to the tragedy, and we were changed forever, as were the people in Battery Park City and the rest of Lower Manhattan. I am deeply, deeply sorry if anyone who lost a loved one thinks that I feel that I suffered in any way as deeply as they did. I don't. I understood from the very first moment that gratefully I was on the outside looking in. But of course, being an up-close witness to something like that puts you in a special place. I actually wrote a rather long article for Homeopathic Journal about what happened down here because it was an interesting homeopathy story all along. You know, I mean, I could see people right away who needed treatment, and I treated them. Foolishly, I didn't treat myself. We ran home after the first building came down, and we were rushing around to grab a few things. We were in a panic. And when the second building started to go, for some reason, we must have been in a line with it. And everything started shaking, and the noise was tremendous, and everyone in the street was screaming. And needless to say, we overreacted, but we thought the building was falling on us. So it was a truly horrifying number of seconds. And Ruben went into a trance, in fact, thought he had died, you know. I mean, we actually said goodbye. And, Ruben was in a trance, and luckily I was able to treat him with a remedy, a famous remedy for shock and fright. And he snapped out of it immediately, and I could say to him, okay, honey, put on your bicycle helmet, we're going to leave now. And he was able to do it. And I think it's one of the reasons that Ruben recovered as well as he did from the entire experience, because he was treated right away. I probably shouldn't say this on film, but, you know, I have a certain amount of money hidden in my house. It never occurred to me to take that money with me. It never occurred to me to bring a passport. It occurred to me to bring underpants. You know, that was what I did. I ran and I put underpants in my pocket. And the bicycle helmet, I remember saying to Ruben, like things are going to be falling on his head, put on your bicycle helmet. I thought that was so funny, like, you know, sort of real basic civil defense is where my head was. Looking back on it 2 times that day, even though it turned out my place was fine. But you didn't know. If you remember back, the biggest thing about it was we didn't get the manual. Nobody knew. I sort of thought that because those buildings were so huge and we were connected, that gas lines, and I think this is what the fire department and everyone thought, gas lines would start blowing, you know, things were going to happen all around the neighborhood. So that day, I said goodbye to my house, and I said to everything in it, you know, all this stuff could be gone, goodbye. And then the next day, I said it again. I didn't care. I remember saying to Bob, should I bring some photographs? And I said, oh, I don't care. All I wanted was Ruben, and Max had just been brought safely back to college. So that's all I'd want the next time, is my loved ones, you know, that's it. And a pair of underpants, you know. So I treated a lot of people if they wanted it, just by having seen them and seeing the different stages they were in. Some people couldn't stop crying. Some people were shaking all the time. They were so scared. The article that I wrote was identifying the different stages as we moved along. In November, that kind of depression, if you remember around Halloween, we felt compelled as a neighborhood to celebrate it that year as well in 2001. Though I look back on it and think, you know, we probably should have said uncle about a few things and not done that. Because it was such a strange feeling. The smoke was hanging in the air, and we were afraid to even be out that few hours. You know, I remember what a strange feeling that was. And then the smoke started getting thicker, so no one went around trick-or-treating. We all ran to people's homes. it was a strange time, but that was when I noticed that people started, they didn't seem so shocked anymore. They were going into the depression. You know, it was just too heavy. It was too sad. The feeling of, you know, spirits in the neighborhood was very, very strong, and all of that. I think that being overwhelmed by the number of people who had lost their lives here, you know, the grief just became huge for most people who stopped being afraid so much. And I noticed that a lot of us went into this reaction of actually being fearless, which is a common post-traumatic reaction as well. Something I learned about myself that otherwise, if you're not in a situation like that, how do you learn it? I'm definitely the fall apart, what do I do, what do I do, you know, Chicken Little kind of reaction.
Did that surprise you?
It did surprise me, because in small emergencies I'm very good. You know, I'm the person who grabs a bleeding wound and, you know, holds it until I get something to bind it up and so on. I'm not squeamish. But, so it did surprise me. That is something that changed my view of myself in a very profound way. I do think for the most part the children recovered beautifully. I know that they'll tell their children and their grandchildren about this thing that happened, but I think deep in their souls and their beings, they recovered. I think the school did a beautiful job. I think the neighborhood did a beautiful job, and that's where this all started. I thought the neighborhood needed to grieve properly, and I think we did, in spite of the fact that we were being asked to act normal and be normal. I think the neighborhood took its time and grieved. Unfortunately, when that year came, as it does, and I knew this when my husband was killed, a year comes along and everyone looks at you like, now everything's okay, right? And it isn't. You're changed forever, and people have trouble, Americans have trouble recognizing or accepting that about someone else. So a lot of us in this neighborhood needed to keep going in the grief and finish it up. And I do think now most of us have gone through that place. What we lived through is a tiny, tiny little microcosm of what the people in Iraq have been living through for years and years. And I can't take that lightly. I can't take the fact that, you know, Iraqi children and Middle East children, and many of them in general, have never known what it feels to be safe. I know that I will never be the person that I was before. But frankly, you know, that's been true a number of times in my life. It was just such a huge, huge thing to witness. To witness a tragedy like that, and death of that magnitude, and not be touched forever by, spiritually, honestly, by what happened, I think would be unusual. You know, my first son's family is in Jamaica. They're from Jamaica. My husband was Jamaican, and we were just there. We just got back 5 days ago. And it was the first time in 2 years that I felt like the person I'd been 2 years before. I got there, and it took me a couple of moments to realize that, oh, that's what this is. This is me before 9/11. It was the oddest feeling, and I realized that's why Ruben was, you know, deliriously happy there. And it was a wonderful thing to know both things. Yes, I'll be changed forever, but also, yes, I'm still there, you know. It's 2 years. I knew I was there somewhere, because I feel much better than I did a year ago. Everything was light. It was a real, as they say, lightness of being that I recognized, you know. old optimism. I started fantasizing. I had a fantasy. I have a small piece of land there. And I started drawing plans for a house. I haven't had a fantasy in over 2 years. It's been, daydreaming hasn't really been, that's something that went away. That kind of foolish optimism, it's hard to have that again, Those are the things that I think change, those deep, deep ways of looking at life.